There's a real possibility of a full-blown crisis on the labor front, and this has pitched labor firmly against the government. As we stand tonight, we have several labor unions either already on strike or threatening to go on strike. If you look at the list here, a tall list indeed, you have those already on strike. Senior Staff Association of Public Universities, they are on strike. You have the Federation of Universities Senior Staff Association on strike also. And both of them, their main concern will be the Tier 2 pension payment. They say they've made the payments, they've been deducted, but that money has not been transferred to their pension fund. They are asking government to do exactly that. And then you have the Teachers and Education Workers Union, TEU, that is also on strike over the same issue of the Tier 2 pension payment. And then the Ghana Association of University Administrators also on strike. They are talking about conditions of service. So a host of them, at least 4 of the main labor unions in the education sector are currently on strike as we speak. And that, we know, has led to some difficult circumstances for the universities currently. Particularly, filth has begun to pile up at the universities, posing a health challenge in some of them where we've been. The libraries have been locked up. The primary schools that the universities run have been shut down since last week. That is clearly a problem that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed immediately. And then you have, as we now know, the TUC also now getting into the picture, and they, together with 35 other unions, have told us and have warned government that they are calling a nationwide strike that will come after this 13th of February, where they will hit the streets across the country with simultaneous coordinated series of protests that will happen on the same day in every regional capital in every region. And today they began this whole march towards the 13th and beyond. After the 13th, there's a national strike by all workers with the wearing of red armbands. That we've seen that already. That is, as I've said many times, if indeed happens, will grind this country to a halt, will shut this country down because all the workers will go. What are their issues? Their issues are pretty simple. We're talking about this 15% VAT on electricity tariffs, which is what they are fighting for. And they've asked government to withdraw the letter that was written to the ECG, asking the ECG to implement this. On this very show, we spoke to the MD of the ECG, who was sitting right there with me, and it was very clear that it was going to be a nightmare to implement it. It says it's going to be very, very difficult, and I have an update for you on that. I'll tell you pretty shortly. But if you look at it, they say if you remove it, they will cancel the strike. If you don't, they will strike. And this is going to be after the 13th. The 13th is just a demonstration. Government can survive the demonstration because it's one day. But post the 13th, it's going to be a nationwide sit-down. Workers across the board, if they're actually even asking private workers in the private sector like myself, to also sit down that day. They say, I cannot come on television that day and host PM Express because I am a worker. That's how determined they are. They've written to the police already, notifying the IGP of their intention to go on the demonstration on the 13th. Now, we know the position of government on this already. Government issued a statement. They didn't say anything about withdrawal or otherwise of that letter, but the finance ministry was clear that they want to hold dialogue. They want to dialogue with the labor unions on this. They asked for restraint. The labor unions have been emphatic that this is not something they can dialogue about, right? But why is this important? Why are the labor unions so determined to bring their numbers to show government where power lies on this subject? It's simple. If you look at the build-up here, yes, it's 15%, that's what you hear, but it is cumulatively in the region of 21%. Because if you're doing the 15%, you also have to factor in the Get Fund levy, NHI levy, COVID-19 levy, and altogether gives you that huge, significant amount that you have to pay. We try to break this down a bit more so we understand the impact. So if you currently pay a bill of 20 cedis, if they put the 15% on that, plus all the other levies that come together, because you have to charge that 15% on all the other levies that already exist, it comes with it automatically. You are paying 24 cedis, 38 pesos. If they add the 15% plus the others that I've just illustrated to you. If you pay currently, your bill is 50 cedis, you're going to be paying 60 cedis, 95 pesos. If your bill is 1,000, you're paying 1,219. So you begin to immediately see that this will have quite an impact on workers. It will, because if you look at the picture of how much workers earn in the public sector, it isn't one that you can write home about. It isn't one that the workers really can say takes them home in terms of the salaries they take. Because as you know, 80% of the public sector workers in this country, they earn below 3,000 cedis. So for that worker who earns, the bulk majority of them earn 2,594 cedis. So for this worker, right, and by the way, as you know, this 15% will apply to consumers who are above the lifeline threshold. But as you heard the MD of ECG tell us, currently they don't have lifeline customers, because you use a fridge and you're automatically out of the lifeline threshold. And definitely, if you are within this bracket, you definitely own a fridge somehow. So that takes them out. So potentially all this huge number that we are talking about, those who earn 3,000 cedis, 80% of the public sector workers will fall beyond that threshold. They will be outside the lifeline bracket, which means they'll be paying that 15% plus, right? So if you earn 2,549 and you are consuming, say, in a region of 500 cedis a month, or say even 200 cedis a month, 243 cedis. You say, yeah, but only 43 cedis more, but it means a lot to that person. That is transportation. That is the opportunity cost here becomes a factor. That is money that possibly that individual will use for trotro to work. That is not going to be put on electricity. That gives you a sense of why the labor unions are incensed by this, and they say they will not dialogue on this matter until it's removed. So that's the picture there. But then if you look at the bigger question here, and that's why we have Professor Godfrey Bokwen to join us on this conversation, because this fundamentally is about the IMF program. We went to the IMF, and this program is very different from the ones we've had in the past where the IMF dictated to us. We were asked to come forth, and it's so similar to what we had in the 2014-2015 time, the last time we were at the IMF. This government, go to the IMF, you put your own program with it before the IMF, you discuss it. Does it deliver on the outcomes that the IMF is expecting, that you both agree on? If it does, it will be agreed, sealed, and put in a program. What we are currently attempting to implement with the 15% is part of that program. It is the government itself that said, we want to do this, because the IMF was clear that we need to remove the VAT exemptions, right? And remember that this 15% is being implemented, or the proposal is to implement it pursuant to a law that was passed in 2013. But somehow, we've exempted its implementation. IMF says, remove that exemptions. And if you do so, you would save a significant amount of money, because Ghana loses 2% equivalent of GDP in VAT exemptions. And that exemption that we created for electricity, the proposal was that remove it. Government says, yes, we can do so. And that's how come we are now asking the ECG to implement this. The numbers are obvious on your screens there, which is 17 billion. That's what cedis, that's what we lose to VAT exemptions, or $1.6 billion. And so if you bring into the VAT bracket electricity, you are going to make savings here, right? Remember, there's also the question about water, which, of course, government hasn't touched yet. But that fundamentally is the principle behind the 15%. It is an IMF question. We put before the IMF ourselves that we can do it as part of the program. IMF agreed. As we speak tonight, the cabinet decision that has been reported, my understanding is that the government's position on this matter is that this is not something that can be implemented because there's no ally, right? So there's a legal question that has been thrown up right now. But they have to go back to the IMF and say, well, we say we can do this, but considering the challenges that we're going to have, how much of a nightmare this is going to be for ECG to implement. Considering that we don't have an ally to back this, this is not something we can do. But the IMF will ask a very important next question the minute we sit and make this proposal. Okay, so show me the alternative that can make up for what you will lose for not implementing the VAT on electricity consumption. And the government will have to find a way to still make that money. It will always circle back to me and you to pay somehow. Professor Bokwen and the rest of my colleagues from Organized Labor will join me for a conversation on this. Stay with me after. And PM Express is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Alobo Bitters experience greatness in every moment. Ghana AIDS Commission and Pepsodent. Every smile matters. And if you really want a tank that will store water and last almost forever, then you need to think about Syntex Tanks. It is first introduced a double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. It is bespoke. You can order any color, any size or preference, and they will deliver. And they also introduce you to that extraordinary warranty. Nobody else has it. That is up to 7 years warranty. You can call them. They are nationwide across the country. 0244 335 168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. Syntex Tanks are here strong, are here tough. And of course, Pepsodent Cavity Fighter is fortified with profluoride and microcalcium ingredients, sealing tiny and invisible holes in your teeth. This prevents cavities, keeps your teeth strong and mouth healthy. Pepsodent Cavity is one that you need to get. It comes in 155G, a big family pack of 120 gram, Jaqua pack, 65 gram and 12 gram sachets. So you can always get what you can afford at any time. Don't just use toothpaste that brushes your teeth. Use Pepsodent that protects your teeth. Pepsodent is recommended by the Ghana Dental Association. Every smile matters. And my guest joining me for this very important conversation is Suleimana Abdurrahman. He's the national president of TEU, and he joins me in the studio. We can also speak tonight on PM Express to the Executive Secretary of the National Labour Commission. And as you know, each time the workers proceed on strike or they serve him the notice, it comes to his attention and he has to find a way to deal with it. Ofusu Asamoah is the head of the NLC. Joshua Ansam, he's no stranger to PM Express. He's my guest also. He's a Deputy Secretary General at the TUC. Professor Godfrey Bokwin is joining me. Why? He is economist and professor of finance at University of Ghana Business School. A lot of what we are talking about has to do with the IMF program that we are currently under. If the IMF program wasn't there, much of this wouldn't happen. At least the 15% VAT on electricity consumption. So let's put all that in context. If the workers do not really want the 15% VAT, and government said they can't implement it either, what's the alternative? We'll get to that. I want to get Joshua Ansang's thoughts. Joshua, thanks for joining us again. We are now at 9:22 p.m. And it's been at least 48 hours, 24 hours since we read the story that Cabinet has decided to withdraw the 15% VAT on electricity consumed. Have you had any formal communication on this subject?
Good evening to your cherished viewers this evening. And I must say that as I speak to you now, we have not received any official communication from the government since the rumors broke out this morning or this dawn. Because I heard it this dawn in the morning, I also heard one of the papers reporting. But officially, we have not received any official communication from the government.
Okay, so I presume then that your position hasn't changed. The protest is on and the strike is on.
No, Evans. The process is still on because we indicated that the process will change, our minds will change, and the decision will change if and only if government withdraws unconditionally the imposition of 15% VAT on the electricity bill to the lifeline workers in this very country. Okay. So our position is still on. The process is ongoing. We have started wearing our red armbands. We started using red. Most of our officers are clad in red, and we are marching forward.
Okay. Since the government issued a statement last week, the finance ministry, beyond this reported cabinet meeting, has anybody called from government to say, come, let's talk? Because that's what the finance ministry statement said will happen.
No, Evans, unfortunately, nothing of that sort has happened. So we are waiting to see if something will happen. When the news broke out this morning, I said that definitely by the close of the day, if it is true, government machinery will definitely come out to either confirm or deny what is in the public domain. But unfortunately, it has not happened. And nobody has also called us to any meeting because we indicated in our first release that the time for meetings and negotiations are over. And until the imposition of the VAT is withdrawn totally, You don't think Labour is not prepared to give anybody a chance again?
Okay. I know you've written to the police now. All regional commanders have been served that notice of your planned protest on the 13th of February. Have you at least alerted the NMC, the National Labour Commission?
No, we have not alerted the NMC because this is a nationwide demonstration. We haven't gotten to the strike yet where NMC must be informed. But we think that by the 13th of this month, we know for sure that maybe government will have change of mind and actually write officially to actually change its decision so that Labour can also change the decision. Because the consequences of this intended nationwide strike action cannot be underestimated. And government should know that it is not TUC, it is not only organized labor, it is everyone in this very country. And when you say organized labor, it comprises of every worker in this very country, be it public or private, be it informal or formal, market women, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, GPRTU, and so on and so forth. So the consequences will be a die to this very country, which not all of us will not be happy to see. So we are still waiting that government should issue a formal letter to withdraw the imposition of the 15%, but if only it is true that cabinet have met to take that decision.
Yeah, but the roadmap is clear. After the 13th, if you don't get what you're asking for, then the strike follows. The strike follows. Okay.
Yes, it follows.
Then that's Mr. Samuel with the NMC. That's notice to you, is it not?
Perhaps it's constructive notice.
but let me ask you. You're a worker yourself. You've heard what the Labour had said, and their plan is very clear. If 13 nothing happens, everybody else is going to stop work, right? So what's the NLC's position on this?
At the moment, the commission has not taken a position on it, like you and I have heard, and of course, all the commissioners have heard of this. But like Mr. Ansan said, this is a demonstration they are going to do in one day or less, perhaps do a march in the morning and go back to work. It's not a full-blown strike. But if you look at it technically, once it is intended to reduce what they normally do, because going on demonstration on that day, you will not go to work. So output is going to be reduced. People are going to be absent from work. And it is intended to press their employers, of course, those in the government sector. We don't know about the private sector. He's talking about organized labor. So, but it is to press over demand for a better welfare for their workers. So technically it's a strike, but I don't think that we can hold them too hard and fast to the demands of the law by saying we should be giving that notice and so on. I doubt very much.
Okay, good. So that's the subject with the organized labor on the subject. And I want to expand this a bit more. And I'll come to the studio. Tewu has your own, because we're putting this together to just get a sense of where labor stands in terms of its relationship with government and what they're asking for. So I'll come to the studio pretty shortly. But I want to bring in very quickly Professor Godfred Bokwe. Prof, this is a fight over 15% VAT. And as we illustrate, that 15% VAT on electricity consumed is part of our agreement with the IMF. So there's only one question to ask. If the labor unions say they don't want it, government circles have told us there's a clamor within government itself that this shouldn't be implemented. Can the government find a way out of this, considering that they put this forth when they met the IMF in a greener program?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, that's quite a difficult situation that government finds itself. More so because if you look at the energy sector, in fact, it's the biggest problem the country is facing right now. Right, Evans, if you look at the energy sector shortfall from 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, it's more than 90 billion cedis, right? And annually, that works to more than 23 billion cedis, right? That has to be closed. But if you look at the approach government has adopted to close that, and I think that is where the problem is, right? So there are inefficiencies, both technical, commercial, from generation, transmission, distribution, And then also ECG itself is very poor at collecting its revenue and all of that. If you put all of that together and you look at the level of utility adjustment under this program alone, from the first quarter of 2023, first quarter, the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and then also the VAT, the 15% VAT on the consumption, I think that's just too much, right? So for purposes of efficient pricing, without a certain level of efficiency, you can never talk about realistic pricing. You keep imposing more taxes and utility adjustment, and it will not solve the problem. So and once you continue that way, it's like you are majoring on the minor, right? And then again, you also want to look at the mix. If you look at residential consumers versus corporate and the rest of them and all of that, I think that government has not thought through the optimal way of closing that shortfall, okay, rather than just passing the burden on consumers and all of that. The reality on the ground is that there's practically no fiscal space for the average Ghanaian and even for businesses to take on additional taxes or levies or whatever. Government, we are just pushing ourselves increasingly to the point where the only option left will be that there will be some kind of disruption. And government should have known that much earlier. And I don't think that it is so much of the doing of the IMF, right? Because in terms of the broad framework of what kind of fiscal balance you want to have, and then what revenue and the rest of them, and the specific strategies that the government intends to adopt is entirely within the remit of the government.
Yeah, but
okay,
Prof,
remember first and foremost.
But Prof, very quickly though on this same subject. So if not 15%, we still have to find a way of making up for the revenue that we will lose if we don't implement the 15%. Is there room for that? And where could government possibly get that 15% from?
Fiscal adjustment has two layers: revenue and expenditure. If you look at the way the IMF program is designed, the bulk of the fiscal adjustment is coming from revenue, more taxes, and far less from expenditure. So if the government approach is that we are going to keep our lifestyle, we are not going to cut wasteful expenditure in order to ease the burden on Ghanaian households and private sector, but we have a population we can keep taxing, I think that is not prudent. That is not acceptable. And even that is not the way to go either. Okay, so because we can continue on that path and there will still not be a way out. So I think it's about finding the specific mix of the revenue and then the expenditure adjustment that eases the burden also on household and businesses. That as you try to restore macroeconomic stability, it doesn't come so much at great cost to households and private sector. I think we are getting that balancing wrong, and that is what the problem is. And if you look at the energy sector, from the entire value chain, from generation to transmission to distribution, you can see that. And even if you look at the revenue that ECG collects, ECG doesn't keep to the requirement of the cash waterfall mechanism. Right? Okay, that is part of the energy sector recovery plan and the rest of them. Okay, so there are real issues about liquidity management that we need to look at. Okay, and the inefficiencies there, which is also aided even significantly by politically connected transactions. Okay, through procurement that is mostly shrouded in lack of transparency and disclosure. Okay, that imposes costs.
Okay.
On the consumer.
So in other words, you're saying that there are significant
to the consumer.
There are significant loopholes there that can be plugged to raise additional revenue. But practically where we are tonight, government needs to have a very difficult conversation with the IMF on this 15% VAT on electricity consumption. How do you anticipate that conversation will go? Will it be easy for the government to have its way if indeed what we're hearing is the fact that the cabinet, the president himself, is not in favor of implementation?
Yeah, Evans, if you look at that 15%, okay, and you do the calculation with respect to residential consumers, that is not what is going to change the game necessarily. there are some tax handles that bring so much inconvenience to the citizens, that bring so little to the revenue envelope. You should look at the optimal mix, right? And then you also look at so you are looking at the whole picture. You're looking at what expenditure rationalization you can do. What kind of look, if we would allow ECG to operate independently without political interference, and we allow the procurement and all to be done transparently and efficiently, Evans, these problems can easily be solved. The problem is that politically connected transactions inflate costs, okay, on the average Ghanaian. And if we continue like this, look, Evans, it doesn't matter the level of adjustment. There will always be losses. There will always be losses. If you check the collection rate of ECG, it's very low. You check with a considerable level of investment that we have seen in the energy sector from government. The inefficiencies, technical losses, generation, transmission, distribution keeps rising.
Well, I mean, we say that, but the ECG MD was here with me, and he even says, in spite of the challenges, they will still have a nightmare attempting to implement the 15% of VAT. Let me quickly bring in Joshua, and then I'll come to the studio now. Joshua, so having heard from Professor Bokwe on the subject of the IMF and its 15%, I agreed with them. We put a proposal. Does it strengthen your case or weaken your case to go on a demonstration asking for it to withdraw?
It strengthens our position and our case. And I believe Prof is a worker, so he understands the plight of workers. You see, let me add to what Prof has just said. If government also establishes a way of collecting taxes effectively in this very country, Ghana will never go borrowing from IMF. If government find a way of collecting property tax rates, Ghana will not go begging. If government change its lifestyle, like Prof said, Ghana will not go begging for loan outside there. So there are so many ways government must use, but because anytime government slaps something on workers, your poor workers are there, they cannot talk, they have to absorb it. But this time around, like you have said, if we are asleep, now we are working, and there's no way that we are going to accept anything that is going to bring additional burden to the already workers who are suffering in this very country. You were showing some table on the how do you call it, on the screen. It is a pity. Look at the average worker salary, and look at the new rate. If this 15% VAT is applied, even it is going to be very difficult and very burdensome for workers in this very country. And enough of that. Enough is that.
Mr. Sama, do you have any sympathies for organized labor?
Yes, I do. I'm a worker myself, like you said earlier. We all stand to suffer whatever the effect is. So I have sympathy for them.
I mean, you're part of organized labor, so are you wearing a red armbands today?
No. I'm not wearing a red armband myself, but I've seen a few of my people wearing it anyway.
Oh, I see. At the National Labour Commission?
No, in the building, not within the commission. But I know we are about 5 institutions in the building.
Okay, I know what you mean. Let me come to Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman, you represent TEWU, right, across the country, but you have your own substantive issues, and we'll talk about that. But on the subject, you're part of organized labor, are you not? Okay, so you definitely will join if that protest comes off on the 13th.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Then good evening to your listeners. Yes, so what it is that TEWU Ghana is keenly monitoring whatever is happening as far as labor, and then government is concerned. This, 15%, I believe everybody is crying, including even government officials, because I've been told that the president himself is not comfortable implementing this. So that shows that government did not actually do some due diligence behind the scenes before bringing it to the public. Because if they had done so, I am not sure it would have come out for labor to even resist it. But if you look at, the economy, in Ghana is very difficult for, a common worker as far as the public university is concerned.
That directly links your substantive concern, complaint, for which reason you are currently on strike.
Yeah.
I believe you haven't been to work in the last few days yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Primarily, the Tier 2 pensions.
Yeah.
You say they've deducted it, but they haven't given it to the pension managers, right? Government says the economy currently is in a dire place. That's why they're actually implementing 15%. They want to implement 15% on VAT. And so just hold on, sort the economy out, and you will be sorted. Well, what's the problem with that? Can't you empathize with that position?
You see, the problem here is this. There is no worker in Ghana here who can default payment of tax. And before, our salaries have been paid into our various accounts, they deduct the tax from our salaries. And these monies that we are talking about, the Tier 2 pensions money, it is our own money. The money doesn't belong to government. It's our own salary that they deduct a component to keep, or let me say, give it to the trustees of the Tier 2 to invest. And when you are going on retirement, they will pay you the lump sum. And before they pay you the lump sum, they will have invested the money so that you use some profits, which will aid, your retirement packages. So this money is for us. It is not for government. So if you ask a question that the government says that we should give them some time for us to, solve IMF problem, I think we might have to come again. We think that, as the TUC Secretary General rightly said, if government try to stop the loopholes, I believe we will not be struggling to borrow money outside the country. Why do I say so? You have, people deviating tax payments and government waiving tax for importations and all those things. If you look at those huge monies and government try to collect those monies, I don't think we will have problem. And this Tier 2 pension, as I rightly said, imagine a worker in the public universities, when you are at the service, you are struggling. Not talk of when you have been on retirement. And the retirement, you need more resources to take care of yourself because the person is aging. So the person, buy drugs almost here and almost every day, visiting hospitals and all that. So in active service, you are struggling. And on retirement, the money that you are supposed to use in taking care of yourself, government is still holding part of these monies. I think it is something that government will have to look at it and make sure that they pay these monies.
Where are you in attempting a resolution to this problem? Have you been called for a conversation by government?
As a matter of fact, Tertiary Education Workers Union of Ghana have not been called for any engagement.
Even after you declared a strike?
Yes, even after we declared a strike.
In spite of all the filth we've seen on the campuses?
Exactly. So what government sought to say was, they are trying to pay the Tier 2 pensions funds, and they believe if they pay, we'll go back to work. Forgetting that the Tier 2 pension fund is not just the only issue that we have. We have problems of payment of vehicle maintenance allowance to deserving staff.
That is also part of the...
Yes, that is also part. Yes.
Vehicle maintenance allowance.
Yes, and then overtime allowance to our deserving staff in the public universities.
So you're saying that even if they pay the pensions that you've asked for, you still remain on strike until they pay you the vehicle maintenance allowance?
Exactly, because we expect government to engage us. We sit down to dialogue on those issues. And the surprising thing is that National Labour Commission, in their last ruling that we had, UTAC, GAWA, ACC, and TEO Ghana, the ruling was that government should pay us a vehicle maintenance allowance without any discrimination. But here's the case, government is paying these allowances, but rather trying to say that they will not pay some of our members. And the issue is very clear. We have a condition of service, and the condition of service says that if you have a motorbike, they should pay the motorbike maintenance allowance. If you have a car, they should pay the car maintenance allowance.
How much is that? What's the average amount?
Yes. So
it depends on the car, the type of car you drive.
Exactly. The car maintenance allowance is fixed. And that was what we were fighting for some few months ago. That is the 10.99 increment. Yes. So it is fixed, and it is across board. As long as you are a permanent staff in the public universities, when you owe a car, you submit, yes, you submit the car documents to, the employers. They make sure that it goes through auditing. Auditors will check to be sure whether you have a car. Is the car belongs to you before they pay you this allowance.
So, vehicle maintenance allowance, overtime allowance, and your pensions,
exactly,
deductions made that have not been paid.
Exactly. So these are the issues
exactly. Pardon me, Mr. Sama with the NLC. This is something you've engaged on. Have you made any progress?
Well, like you said, the National Labour Commission has given its ruling that they should be paid. So we expect government to comply, except that it's unfortunate that has not been done. But like you said, they are still engaging on the time for payment and mode of payment. But we have given our ruling.
What about the pension subject?
Yes, the pension also came before the commission, and government readily agreed that yes, the deductions have been made. It wasn't paid to the fund managers. So they want to negotiate with them so that they do the payment. I suspect the money is not lying down, so they want to pay over a period. And that is the negotiation that is going on. I think there was a meeting on the 1st of February, about 5 days ago. But the unions are insisting that they are not negotiating anything. They want to see the payment to their fund managers because some of their colleagues have gone on retirement already, and they need to get the money to live on. So if you want to say you want to negotiate and pay it later, for how long would they be waiting? I think that is what they said before the commission. So, as to their entitlement to that money being paid to their fund managers, there is no argument about it, but it's a matter of payment. That is what they are relying on now.
Okay. There's a fundamental question that must be asked, though. And Professor Bopwin, that question goes to you. It comes down to the government's ability to pay the overtime allowance, to pay the vehicle maintenance allowance. And there's a real financial reason why the pension funds contributions have actually been deducted but not paid to the fund managers. We all saw what happens with the fund managers around the time we're doing the domestic debt exchange. Can government afford, realistically, where we are to meet the demands of labor?
I think that government can afford.
You think so?
These are obligations. Yeah, if it matters most to government, they will find the money. They are competing interests, right? They are competing interests. So, if it's about organizing a by-election in a constituency, government will find the money to do it. They will spend their way to win that election. So government has to find the money.
But you know that there isn't fiscal space for that. Where they find the election money, they will tell you it is private contributions that they raise for that. It doesn't come from state government. It doesn't come from revenues we collect from taxes. This one, it has to come from the consolidated fund somehow. And that is tightly monitored. They can't find the money realistically, can they?
Evans, I'll just give you, I've said this a couple of times, right? If you pick just the two main tax handles, VAT and corporate income tax, the VAT inefficiency is more than 56%. The corporate income tax, the inefficiency is more than 82%. So there's considerable room to collect more tax revenue through efficient compliance and administrative reforms. It's possible. It's also possible for the same government to look at the overall cost of governance. Government has option. It's just that, there are competing interests. So you rank them.
But Prof, if it's possible,
you pay less attention to them.
But Prof, if it's possible, why is it that no government has achieved anything close to bridging that gap in the efficiency gap? Because it's been there for as long as Ghana has been a republic.
So I think that government responds to incentives. How organized labor presses for their needs, government will respond. And government would have to be efficient, and government will have to block the leakages in the revenue envelope and all of that, because these are obligations. These are obligations that you have to prioritize. These are workers. Look, it's just that, look, Evans, we don't value the average worker. If we had those values for them, we wouldn't allow our pensioners to go through what they went through with their domestic debt exchange and picketing and the rest of them. We just don't have values for ourselves that much. So I think that, and the point is that it is not as though these are trade-offs, investment that you hope that a very committed and well-governed country can turn itself around and reward labor for the sacrifices they've made. That is not guaranteed. Okay, that's not guaranteed. And increasingly, we are losing confidence and trust in government and government institutions. And that's why it's very difficult to really come to the aid of government in difficult times like this. Yeah, because government is not giving any indication that really the austerity is biting on them. Okay? And that when we say tighten your bets, they are equally doing so. They are not doing so.
Well, you made the point about
transferring the burden.
You made a point about difficult times like this. Mr. Samoa, at the National Labour Commission, considering the organized labour position on a 15% VAT on electricity consumption, considering the TEU, the Senior University Senior Staff Association strike that we've already seen, are you really concerned that we are gradually just walking into a major crisis on the labour front if this is not checked immediately? That may overwhelm you.
Oh, I don't think we have crisis on our hand now. Or, for us as a commission, but as a commission, what are we there to do? We are there to adjudicate on cases, facilitate settlement, settle if need be, mediate and arbitrate on labor disputes as and when they arise. And I don't think that this challenge has been difficult for us to do. We are like what our friend in TU said and that of TUC. Their cases came before us. The commission looked at it. Now your pensions have been deducted. It has not been paid to the fund manager. Was that the arrangement? The arrangement is that deduct the money, pay to the fund managers. If it is not paid within a specific period, this is the interest or penalty that you are supposed to pay. Accordingly, the commission gave its directive. But it was when it came to the penalty that the government alleges that there was a negotiation between them and organized labor so that the 3% will not apply, which was denied by, the union leaders of the various universities. So then we are given the chance to go and see whether that negotiation was done on their behalf. And that is what they are negotiating. If they come out to say that there was an agreement on the 8th when they appear before the commission adopts it. But if it is not, the commission will give it its directive. And we expect whichever party against whom it goes to comply. You see, we thought, I don't think it's a difficult. Where there's non-compliance, the law provides for means of enforcement, either against the government, any other employer, or the unions. So, you see, when you want to talk about crisis, there are some of them which is not linked to the work of the labor union. The Labor Commission. For example, the protest against the 15% electricity, that has nothing to do with the National Labor Commission. Because, like you said, this is one of organized labor. And
except that, Mr. Samoa, they've served you notice that after the 13th protest, if nothing happens, they will withdraw their service. They will go on strike.
Yes, we haven't received that notice yet, like Mr. Ansan said. When it comes to there, we get to that bridge, we will know how to cross it. But at the moment, just wearing red armbands and going on one-day demonstration to protest against the 15%, I don't think I would describe it as a crisis on our hands.
Mr. Samoa, you said earlier that on the issues that had been raised by TEU and others, that you had a clear ruling on the matter that government must pay, right? Yeah. Government hasn't paid. What is the commission allowed to do to enforce that? Because you have the powers of a high court.
Yes, we do. And you see, when a decision is given on your behalf and the other party is expected to comply, when there is non-compliance, it is reported to the commission, and then the commission will seek enforcement in the high court.
So why are you not in the high court seeking enforcement against the government?
Because at the last time they appeared before the commission, after they had complained, they agreed to go and negotiate. You see, in fixing on the 8th, it was the two parties who agreed that they want to go and see. Your government have made a proposal. You see, the thing is, the government is not denying that they are not entitled to all the deductions were done. But they said, yes, we did it. Yes, we owe. There's an applicable penalty. However, we want to talk with you because we cannot pay it instantly. You see, if there was an outright rejection at the time, then we know that we have hit the wall, there's a stalemate, then the commission must take a decision. But at the time, the unions agreed that we are ready to meet them on the 1st, and whatever happens, we will convey our report to the commission on the 8th.
So
if
to be...
it was clear that they have hit the wall, nothing can be done, then the commission will proceed. But where the parties appearing before the commission have agreed to go and meet on it, who are we to say no? Because, you know, when it comes to labor and industrial relations, it's not a one-time thing. After all, whatever happens, they will go back and work together. It just doesn't end there. So we allow parties to negotiate, to settle, so that they come out with terms that are acceptable to them, because they came out, they made it themselves.
So to be clear, the only reason why the NMC hasn't gone to the High Court, to the court, to enforce its ruling against the government on the subject of the non-payment of the Tier 2 pensions, the deductions that have been made, the overtime allowance and the vehicle maintenance allowance, is because the workers themselves have agreed to sort of negotiate with the government.
Yes. So they have shown that there's room for engagement. So we cannot shut the door.
Okay.
But if at the 8th, or is it on the 8th and on the 14th, Gawa is coming, if they come and it is clear that they have hit the wall, there's no room for any further negotiation, mediation or anything, then the commission must take a decision. Well, we can't leave it to hang. So that is where we are.
Yeah, give me your reaction to that.
I think there is a fundamental problem when it comes to NLC ruling and directing government to do something right. Because before NLC ruled for the payment of the vehicle maintenance allowance and then the overtime and extra duty allowance and the Tier 2, there was, a lot of engagement between the labor unions with government and then NLC. So there were negotiations, and we agreed at the labor, at the NLC that they should give a ruling. And NLC gave a ruling that government should pay this money.
Yeah, he said
without delay. I'm coming.
He said that.
But
he says you accept that the reason why they haven't enforced it through the courts is because of your own agreement to sit with government and negotiate.
That may not be accurate. Let me make this point very clear. What government was asking for us to sit down to negotiate on the payment issue was the Tier 2. Government says they were not having, they were not having enough money to pay at a bulk, but they promised that they will pay up to date, but the penalty was the problem. And they said we'll negotiate with with government. Yeah. Yes, as far as the penalty is concerned. But when it comes to the payment of the vehicle maintenance allowance and the overtime allowance, it is not negotiable. We have done with that with government. Don't forget that.
So you didn't agree to sit with government for that?
No, don't forget that these components are something that has been part of our salaries. So before every year, there's always a budget to this, to the effect of this payment. So government is very clear about how these payments are going to be. But we are only trying to make sure that they should respect the status quo, the agreement that we have with them, that is our collective agreement. Because the labor law made it very clear that if you had an agreement, with the employer, no party can vary it unless the two parties sit on a round table to do that. Yeah. So at what point will government decide that, look, even though you have a car, we'll pay you motorbike allowance?
Let me ask you, so what's your next move? He said that the reason why they haven't enforced it is because of you. You say, well, you have to distinguish the issues. Yes, we agree to sit with the government about the pensions, but so what's your next move?
We think that NLC should be bold enough to instruct government, emphasize when they are ruling that they should go ahead and pay our members the vehicle maintenance allowance and then the overtime and extra duty allowance. In case
there's a meeting that's going to happen, and that after that meeting, they will take a decision on that. Do you accept that?
You know, I mean, he mentioned Gawa. Mm-hmm. He didn't mention Teo Ghana. He didn't mention ACC. He said Gawa will be meeting them on the 8th. Mm. So if he's talking about a meeting on the 8th, then all of us should have been part of that meeting. Mm. So that we can sit down to agree or not to agree. But if you're only inviting Gawa to sit with Gawa to negotiate, there's no way it will have effect on Teo Ghana because our members is different from Gawa's members.
Will you ask for separate negotiations with government and the NMC on this?
We are humbly waiting for government to engage us. So as and when they engage us, we'll sit down with government to resolve these issues.
Okay, well, gentlemen, this is a subject that we'll have to revisit. As you know, 13 is approaching. The TEU and the others are still on strike. There's a meeting scheduled for the 8th. There's a lot happening on Labour front. NLC says, well, they're not worried that we are slowly walking into a crisis. Well, we'll see how all this is averted in the midst of an economic crisis. Professor Bokpin says we can't find the money government prioritized. Enjoy the rest of your evening.